Have you ever done something you knew was wrong? Not because you were confused, not because you were desperate, but just because. Maybe you said something cruel you immediately regretted. Maybe you scrolled for another hour when you knew you should sleep, right? You weren't ignorant, you weren't overwhelmed, you just chose it anyway. 1600 years ago, a young man named Augustine stole pears from an orchard. He wasn't hungry. He didn't even like pears. He threw them to pigs. This seemingly trivial act became one of the most analyzed moments in Western philosophy because it exposes something uncomfortable about human nature that the greatest thinkers of the ancient world couldn't explain. To understand why this matters, we need to see what Augustine was rejecting, the elegant philosophical solution that had dominated Western thought for 8 centuries. Plato offered a beautiful theory: evil comes from ignorance. If you truly understood the good, you would do it. No one chooses what they genuinely know to be worse for them. This makes evil a solvable problem. Education becomes salvation. Know better, do better. The solution is more philosophy, more learning, more understanding. It's deeply appealing. It means every terrible act stems from confusion, not malice. It means the path to virtue runs through the classroom, and it dominated ancient philosophy because it treats humans as fundamentally rational beings who just need the right information. Now consider Augustine's pear theft. He's a teenager in 4th century North Africa, bored with friends one evening. They pass an orchard. They steal pears, not a few, but more than they could ever eat, right? Here's what makes this philosophically devastating. Augustine wasn't hungry. He didn't particularly want pears. He had better fruit at home. The theft was gratuitous, done for its own sake. They threw the pears to pigs. Augustine later wrote that he loved the theft itself, not the pears, the wrongness, the transgression. Something in him wanted to do wrong precisely because it was wrong. Platonism cannot explain this. Education doesn't touch whatever made him do it. Christianity offered a different answer: sin. Not ignorance, deliberate wrongdoing despite knowledge. The problem isn't in the head, it's in the will, the heart, something beneath reason that reason cannot reach. This explains what Platonism cannot, why smart people do terrible things, why knowing better doesn't make us better, why self-help books don't transform character. Throughout history, Christianity oscillates between intellectualization, turning faith into philosophy, and rediscovery of this insight. The Reformation, the Great Awakening, Methodist revivals, each represents a return to the idea that transformation requires something education alone cannot provide. The comparison crystallizes the divide. For Platonism, evil stems from ignorance. For Christianity, from sin, deliberate wrongdoing. Platonism prescribes knowledge, Christianity prescribes grace and transformation. Education sits central to one, limited in the other. The will either follows the intellect automatically or operates independently, often corrupted. Two radically different diagnoses of the human condition, two radically different prescriptions for change. But if education can't save us, what can? Augustine found his answer in the most unlikely place. In Book 8 of the Confessions, Augustine recounts meeting Pontitianus, who told him about the Egyptian desert monks, the first Christian monastics. These men fled civilization for the desert. They lived on weeds, saline water, locusts, or they slept on rocks. They owned nothing, and they had visions. Ordinary people sought them out as holy men, traveling days across barren wilderness for their counsel. This follows an ancient shamanic pattern. The seer must be a reject. No spouse, no children, no career, no stake in this world. Their entire focus fixed on another reality. The contemplative life, withdrawing from worldly affairs to pursue wisdom, taken to its most radical extreme. Augustine's response wasn't admiration, it was humiliation. These monks were uneducated. They hadn't read Plato's Republic or Timaeus. They'd never studied Cicero's Hortensius. Many couldn't read at all. Yet they possessed something Augustine's decades of learning could never give him. They had achieved spiritually what his philosophy couldn't approach. Augustine had mastered rhetoric, logic, the greatest texts of antiquity. He could argue circles around these desert hermits, but they had transformed themselves in ways his education never touched. He wrote, "We lie here groveling in this world of flesh and blood while they storm the gates of heaven. This is the moment everything changed." Conversion, the Latin convertio, means turning around. But Augustine's conversion wasn't intellectual. He already believed Christianity was true. He'd been convinced for years. His conversion was emotional apprehension of what his mind already accepted, the heart catching up to the head, feeling the truth he already knew. This makes Augustine, as scholars note, a philosopher of the irrational, the supra-rational. He understood that humans aren't primarily thinking beings who need better arguments. We're feeling beings who need transformation at a level beneath thought. The gap between knowing and doing isn't crossed by more knowledge. The diagram captures Augustine's journey. Before conversion, he stood firmly on the intellectual side, convinced but unchanged. The monk stood on the other side, transformed without philosophy. Conversion bridges that gap, not adding new information, but feeling differently about information already possessed. Augustine crossed over, not because he learned something new about Christianity, but because the monks showed him that knowing truth and living truth are entirely different achievements. One happens in the mind, the other happens somewhere deeper, somewhere education cannot reach. When you do something you know is wrong, that's not a knowledge problem. No amount of reading will fix it. No podcast will transform you. Information has limits. Real change requires something deeper than understanding, emotional transformation, not just intellectual assent. The question isn't, what do I need to learn? It's, what do I need to feel differently about what I already know? This is why self-improvement through information alone fails. We don't lack knowledge of what we should do. We lack the transformation to do it. Augustine spent his life mastering the greatest ideas of the ancient world. He could quote Plato, debate Cicero, analyze Aristotle. His intellectual achievements rivaled anyone in late antiquity. But it took uneducated men eating locusts in the desert to show him that knowing the truth and living it are two entirely different things. The Pear theft proved we choose wrong despite knowing better. The monks proved that transformation happens beneath the level of thought. Augustine's conversion proved that the heart must follow where the mind has already gone.